Welcome back. And we have just spent the past 7 weeks looking at attachment theory and getting the basics of that so that we can prepare to use this information to make positive changes in our lives. So if you are just joining us, that's perfectly fine. You can go back and watch the other videos, but we are getting ready to go into the new topic for the next season. And that is basically going to be the neurophysiology and the trauma, the effects of trauma, and how that all plays together with our attachment system. And again, all of this information is going to eventually pull together to something that's going to be very usable for you to start making changes in your life with the help of a therapist. So as I said, we are at a transition point. It is coming up to spring. By the time this video airs, I think we'll actually be officially into spring. But we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use these transition points to help us make changes in our life. So let's talk a little bit about spring. So by the time this video airs, we will officially be into spring in the northern hemisphere. And the southern hemisphere right now is in fall, and so our seasons are reversed from that order. Basically, this occurs somewhere between March 19th and March 23rd, and that is because of the Earth's tilt on its axis relative position to the sun. So while the northern hemisphere is experiencing spring, the southern hemisphere is kind of tilted away from the sun, so they're experiencing fall right now. Now, this is a time when we usually have equal light and darkness, night and day, basically. And we know this from centuries of science, that we've been able to understand, that the sun doesn't revolve around us anymore as the Earth. We move around the sun and the axis and the solar system. But our ancient ancestors didn't have access to the type of technology that would have allowed them to necessarily explain all of these phenomena going on. So they created their own stories and narratives as to what was actually happening. But ultimately, when we started to get to this point of equal day and night, that's when they knew that there would be more rain, the snow would stop, the temperatures would start getting warmer, flowers would start to bloom, and this was time for them to start to plant for the harvest. So we could actually use some of those ancient traditions, some of nature-based cycles, to kind of have the same patterns in our life. And basically, if you're a person that is solar powered, meaning you have seasonal affective disorder like me, where you need that light lamp during winter because we're solar powered, this is a great time of the year where the sunlight is really starting to show back up. You can actually feel that the days are getting longer, and you can feel your energy start to shift, and you're becoming a little bit more ambitious to do things. I'm actually starting my spring cleaning at home, so it's definitely a great time of year when you start to get a little bit more energy back and you can do some new things. And we're going to talk about how you can actually use that in your everyday life. So a lot of our ancient ancestors would do different celebrations right around this time. And while there's been a revival of some of the ancient spiritual beliefs that are coming up in now neo-paganism and Wiccan traditions, I think there's still some value here in honoring the seasonal change. So for ancestors who didn't know about the science, all they knew was that, like I said, less snow, more rain, flowers started to bloom, and chickens started laying more eggs, which was a fact I did not know until I looked it up. It's a really good time for us to look at our own rebirth. I know that the new year usually marks a lot of people's New Year's resolutions, but I really see that as a time to start kind of looking at what goals you really want to set. And when we hit February 1st is a good time to start implementing those goals. This video series was actually one of them. I started it on February 1st. But this is that rebirth period of time that we're in now. So this is a great point to assess what your goals are doing, how you're actually achieving them, if there's any changes that you need to be making, and then in your overall life, is there anything that really needs a rebirth, a revamp, something to kind of start fresh to make some changes? And this is that great time because that's what's happening in nature all around us as we speak. All of the plants that had died out, like my grass is starting to grow. I can't keep other plants alive apparently, but my grass is starting to grow, which is showing me that there is a rebirth of those plants. So we can take that information and honor that natural season and start to actually do that same rebirth for ourselves. So for those who do honor the nature's cycles, or it's part of their spiritual practice, this is the time when that is actually occurring. So for those of you who celebrate Easter, believe it or not, you can still actually bring in a lot of the same values. So a lot of our ancient pagan traditions were absorbed into Christianity, and Easter is actually one of them. We absolutely absorbed some of those ancient pagan traditions right into our Christian practice of Easter. And you can kind of see this when you look around at Easter and you say, yes, I go to church. Yes, I go to Good Friday service. Yes, I do all of these things. Then why on earth do we have bunnies and eggs? It kind of makes no sense. And when you look at the fact that we absorb some of the pagan traditions right into Christianity, you can understand it a little better. But ultimately, when you look at the concept of Easter, that Jesus died and rose from the grave, we're talking about a new beginning, something different and new that was actually beginning in that time frame. The old had ended, the new had started. And you can still use those same concepts in your everyday life to look at what is from the past that needs to be let go of, and what do I want to create for my future, and use this as a time marker to be able to do that. Now, I don't really want to get too deep into some of the other religious traditions because I'm not well educated enough on them to be able to speak intelligently for them, and I don't want to dishonor them by conveying information that may not be accurate, nor do I have the time right now to dig into a lot of those religious values and viewpoints to be able to research it well enough to bring to you. So I'm talking about the two that I know, which is Ostara and Easter, and bringing that information to you to show how nature basically tells us that this is a time of rebirth and renewal and starting to begin something new. So when you're looking at this in terms of your mental health, this is a fantastic time to take a look at the goals you set on the previous two seasonal changes, what needs to be edited, what needs to be changed, and what do I need to do going forward. So as we're finishing up for today, and I think I've generally hit the point that this is an opportunity for renewal, assessing goals, making changes. The same is true for your relationships. And please understand that when I say relationships, I'm not just talking about your romantic partners. I am talking about all of the relationships that impact your life, everybody who's in your web. So this is your family, this is your friends, these are even your coworkers and your fellow classmates. This is a time to really kind of take a look and see what needs renewal in those relationships. What's going well, what's not going well, what needs to be changed, what seeds for the future do you need to plant now so that you have a good harvest in the fall. This is also a time for people who are looking at perhaps starting a family or expanding their family to start talking about, anything that's going on with fertility. Unless you are extremely fertile, like I was, you're probably not going to get pregnant on the first try. So if you need to start making plans for fertility, this is a good time to do that. And if you're looking at maybe starting a family in the future, what kind of financial things do you need to get together? So this is this great opportunity that nature gives us to kind of start looking at all of this. But then the most important thing is what in your relationships needs balancing, because life is really all about balance. You can't have the good without the bad. You can't have the happiness without the sadness. You can't have the light without the dark. So all of these things have to stay in balance. And it's very possible, especially in the winter when things are kind of restful, that you might need to rebalance some things in your relationship to make sure that your web is healthy and where you need it to be. So this is a great time to do that. And now that we've just finished up all this psychoeducation content on the basics of attachment theory, and we are going to move into the neurophysiology and the trauma, you're going to actually be able to take some of this information and start being able to put it together to rebalance the relationships in your life. So hopefully I'll see you next week and that you're finding this information helpful.